tightly contested race for Chicago mayor, as Mugo just reminded us, is expected to head into a runoff, which means we likely won't know who the real winner is until early April 4th to be exact. Joining us now live via Zoom with Election Day analysis is Twyla Blackmond Larnell, an associate professor of political science at Loyola University Chicago. Doctor, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about today.
And we are anxiously awaiting your insight, as we've been discussing that in this crowded field of 9 mayoral candidates, one has to have 50% plus one of the vote to avoid a runoff. But with a crowded field, it seems highly unexpected to happen. Just 4 front runners that have been noted. Why do you think that we're going to end up in a runoff, and what does it mean for the climate in the city right now?
I think people are already expecting a runoff. Nobody is really expecting to see a true winner here today. It's really, the talk is like, who's going to make it to the runoff? And we're definitely thinking about the top 4 candidates, as you just mentioned. And based on the polling, we see that Paul Vallas has taken a pretty big lead. Looks like Brandon Johnson is running up closely and behind him, maybe not so closely. We'll see how it looks later on tonight. And then Chuy Garcia following in behind them. And I think that top 3 is what everyone was pretty much expecting, which is very interesting because in politics, we usually see the incumbent pretty much soar to the top of the list of candidates in elections, especially if they've had a pretty decent administration. But as you have heard from plenty of commentators and local leaders and voters, it doesn't seem that Lori Lightfoot has really rose to the top 3 candidates in this election.
And let's stay on that point. I mean, Mayor Lightfoot shocked the political establishment as a relative outsider when she won the runoff to become the city's first black female and openly gay mayor. But here we are a few years later after dealing with some pretty difficult situations, being the pandemic, of course, some civic unrest. But do you think she's going to make that top 2 vote getter runoff for the runoff in April? And if not, why not?
I don't really think so. I do think that COVID played a really big role with Mayor Lightfoot's administration, not to mention so much attention has been brought to crime and police reform in the city of Chicago at the same time. I've spoken to so many different people about Lori Lightfoot's mayoral tenure, especially because in politics, we do have this theory of incumbency advantage, and you don't often see, especially in Chicago politics, an incumbent not be able to solidify a solid base. But as you mentioned, she was an outsider. She ran as a reformer. And while we don't really see a Chicago boss, so to speak, anymore, the machine still exists. And as an outsider, as a reformer, many people wonder if she was able to kind of take advantage of the different social, political, and economic networks that are present in the city to get some big things done, right? We haven't really seen some major policies or reforms coming out of the mayor's office during her tenure. And I think everybody, all the different interest groups, identity groups, I think they all have seen that.
Lori Lightfoot in danger of becoming the first Chicago mayor, incumbent Chicago mayor, not to be reelected. We heard from the chairwoman of the Chicago Board of Elections that this is the highest early voting turnout ever. I mean, there's a lot of folks voting early in person and by mail. What do you think that speaks to? Certainly with a lot of the hot button issues we heard from voters who are concerned about crime, about public safety and the economy.
As a political science professor, this is very exciting. I'm excited to see that people are taking this election very, very seriously. It shows us that there are a lot of people who are really interested in seeing who leads Chicago over these next 4 years. People have really big concerns, right? You have a substantial amount of concerns around Chicago public schools, especially as it relates to Black and brown families in the city who overwhelmingly send their children to Chicago public schools. There's a substantial amount of concern about economic development, access to job training and job opportunities in those same communities as well. But then you also have middle income and higher income investors in the city, homeowners who want to make sure that their investments are secure and that they're safe in their communities as well. And so everybody has really, really high stakes in this upcoming election. And so everybody, even your young people, are turning out. I just spoke with some young folks the other day, and they're really interested in seeing more community centers. They want to see more support from getting children from high school to college, even if it's community college or trade school programs. They have a lot at stake in this election. election too, and they are turning out in really large numbers in early voting. And I know many of them are turning out today to vote in person, many of them their first time. And so this is very exciting for them as well.
Well, it's clear Chicago voters are letting their voices be heard. Twyla Blackmond Larnell, Associate Professor of Political Science at Loyola University, Chicago. Thanks so much for your insight as we see how things turn out here on Election Day in the city.
Thank you. Very exciting.